Welcome to the Alain Elkann interviews, an unprecedented window into the minds of some of the most well-known and respected figures of the last 25 years.
Mary, my first question is, it seems from your biography, from your life, that you have a very close relationship with your mother, Linda, right? Mm-hmm. Who was herself a photographer.
Yeah.
Is she the one who induced you to photography?
Growing up in a very artistic visual family was the foundation, in that as you say, my mother was a photographer. Her father was a lawyer who was really he represented sort of abstract expressionists in New York. So he was de Kooning's lawyer, and in that world, so she grew up with art around her, and then that came into our home, and my dad obviously is artistic and she was a photographer, so all of those elements sort of were how I grew up, like seeing exhibitions or having really nice art books. But I never really thought I'm going to become a photographer. I wasn't quite sure where I fit in or what I was going to do. I thought everybody had an artistic eye and everybody could take a photograph. But then, so the other element that was the big influence was the idea of people that can't take photographs or find it intimidating or don't know how to compose or sort of see things in stills or look for those moments. So the two coming together were what really sort of cemented.
When did you really start?
I really started in my early 20s, but when I became really interested in photography, but before I was photographing myself, the moment I fell in love with photography was with my mother when I was probably about 5 or 6. She took me to a little dark room that she had in Soho. And actually, she didn't do very much printing herself. She used to work with her printer. But this time, she sort of took me to her little dark room and she printed a little 10 by 8 inch image herself. And it's just me and her in the studio, in the dark room. And she took the little piece of blank white paper and put it into the tray, and you just sort of wave it, tilt it from side to side, and I saw this black and white image sort of magically appear. I think as a child, the impact of that magic in that moment is what really sort of went into my heart.
You were a child in London. You
Yeah.
spent your whole childhood in London.
Yeah, I was born in London. I went to school in London, but then at 9 we moved to the countryside. I was a London girl, and then there were two sort of strands to our year. We would be school and work, and then in the summers we would sort of just go to Scotland, where my dad had bought a farm. Mum and Dad, we would go there, and it's remote. It's a tiny farmhouse with 6 of us and 4 dogs and horses and chickens and geese.
So
but thousands of acres of land.
Even if you had an American mother, you were really raised in an English...
England.
Yeah.
England and Scotland.
England and Scotland.
With New Year's Eves in Liverpool. So yeah, but I think from an influence on me creatively, the contrast between living in a busy city and then going to Scotland, which was completely remote, is quite interesting, in that it's affected how I like to work. With this remoteness, it's sort of like everything's intensified a bit. So when I collaborate with someone, I want a sort of shortcut to get to know them very quickly.
And even if you had very public parents, it seems from what you say that you had a very private life.
Yeah. So that's sort of that's what interests me, is that, which sort of, even though mine was much more public and sort of in the newspapers, maybe everyone goes through their sort of personal side of their character in their own home or in their bedroom, that then walks out the door into the world. So I think it was intensified in my upbringing, and then to get away from the sort of watchful eyes of people, we would then, as a family, be in very closed quarters and maybe more quiet places. So that contrast has definitely
because somehow
affected.
Children of very well-known people become displaced. Your parents, they gave you a proper family education.
Yeah, I mean, it's a funny one. I think that I think as now that I'm a parent too, I think you just do your best, and you don't necessarily, you kind of make decisions, but you kind of look back on things a bit more maybe as a parent, go that, oh, you know, they wanted us to be brought up in the most normal way as possible. So we went to schools that were kind of quite local, and we had like a sort of a normal routine. They tried to sort of, in between, we would travel a lot and we'd always be together. They wouldn't leave us places.
When you were following your father's concerts.
We would follow them around. So when we were young, I would tour around with them. Then when I got to the age for school, then we stopped in one place, and then it was sort of tied around the school holidays more. But they kept it as normal as possible and in a not very normal situation.
And you have 4 kids yourself.
I do.
And how do you raise them in this?
Again, I sort of try to do my best. I send them to schools that I think will challenge them and they will learn, but also they don't have, you know, that it's kind of local, so they feel that they're London, it's the area they live in, rather than having to travel miles away. And I kind of just sort of try and keep an eye out for them and check in with them. But you know,
your studio is at home. I mean,
my studio is nearby. I have a studio about a 15-minute walk away from
where you go where you go regularly.
I go regularly, and that's where I go. That's where all my contact sheets are. I'm always sort of taking photographs and collecting photographs and coming up with ideas. So that's where I go and sit and brainstorm ideas. And
how is it to be a photographer? You seem to be specialized in portraits, so you do a lot of portraits. How is it to be a photographer in a world where everyone is a photographer all the time? The people take pictures all the time with their telephone, and telephones are more and more good quality, and therefore, you know, how do you...
I find it interesting. I kind of love the fact that anybody... It's democratized photography, so, you know, obviously when it was invented it was technically quite difficult. I love that anyone can sort of see something and photograph it, and how you then use that and utilize it and look and reflect upon it, I think is very different from what I do. Often people just take lots of pictures of everything, whereas I try to sort of look, what I'm really interested in is sort of looking at maybe the everyday or people, and not sort of dramatizing it and producing it into something it isn't. I like to observe what is real in front of me and then sort of figure a way of catching it as a real moment.
So you're not an Instagram person?
I do Instagram.
You do Instagram?
I do Instagram. I used to love it more than I do now.
Why?
Because I find it harder to sort of find things I really want to look at on it now, or you end up following too many people and a lot of things seem quite similar, so things that actually inspire me, I don't use it so much for that.
But
I
you
use
put
it more
your
to
pictures
communicate.
in Instagram?
Yeah, I use it more for communication than inspiration now.
You do a lot of black and white.
I do a bit of, I kind of look at the subject, and I originally probably sort of focused most on black and white, because the photography that really kind of excited me or first sort of really engaged me were those sort of black and white early photographers like Stieglitz and Steichen.
You know, I began this conversation, this interview, asking you about your mother and the influence she had on you. Because not so long ago, in 2016, I think you did 2 major exhibitions, one in New York at Gagosian and another one in Sweden, about you and your mother.
Yeah,
right?
Mother-daughter.
But what was this mother-daughter?
That was...
They were the pictures you took to her before she died?
No, this was an exhibition. It was at Gagosian originally in New York, because Larry Gagosian had seen my monochrome colour book, which was a collection from photographs I've taken from the first day I sort of started till up to date, which was sort of I'm always collecting pictures, so it's going back through the archive and doing a colour book and a black and white book, which is sort of a journey of different court moments, observations. He'd seen that book, and then he'd seen my mother's book, Life in Photographs, and which is a collection again from her whole archive, her whole career. And so he'd seen both books, and he had the idea that to do an exhibition of my photography and my mother's photography in one exhibition. I was asked to curate that exhibition, and they sort of said, we want you to do something of yours and your mother's. And then I went away. I worked with my father on it because he holds my mother's archive, and we came up.
Was your mother and father very loving relationship?
And they talked very closely about her photography. They would sort of sit in the evenings and just talk creatively to each other. And so I remember he knew a lot about her photography and her work, and they came together through her photography in a way, because her photography is what brought her to London, which is where they met. So
and he cares about your. He also cares about your photography.
Yeah, I often ask his opinion, or when I'm doing a book edit, I will show it to him for his. He has a really good eye and he has a good opinion. So yeah, I'll often check in with him and talk to him creatively. But so just to finish the Gagosian exhibition, I went away. Dad and I came up with the title Mother-Daughter. And then once we had the title, I went away, and I know my mother's archive really well because I worked with her on her archive. I'd helped with exhibition edits and projects she was doing, and she and I would talk about. I was a photographer before she died, so she and I would talk creatively. I would tell her about commissions I was doing, and she would talk to me about hers. So I would. Mother-Daughter is a collection of, rather than how my mother influenced me. It's about how we had a very, very similar approach and a similar eye. So
there is a fil rouge between you and your mother's work.
And the hang is similar to this. It's sort of like, it wasn't like just 6 large images. It was a bit of a complicated hang. There were different sets, clusters almost. So maybe 2 pictures, one of hers with an easel with green apples on it, which then would bring to mind one of mine, which is a crate of washed up oranges on a beach that I saw. So those 2, the oranges and the apples, went together. Or a portrait that she took of Jimi Hendrix, which had a similar composition to one that I took of my brother, and then another one that she'd taken of somebody. So they were it was a conversation of images between mine and hers. And as you walked around the room, the viewer would sort of see the similarity in our look.
So your parents were very important for you, right? In your artistic, and not only in your as a girl, but also in your work, in your career.
Yes.
And it wasn't more difficult to make yourself known, having such kind of parents, or you?
I think it's definitely been something, I've gotten much more used to. Now, I think at first, I didn't realise it at the time, but looking back on it, especially when I was approached to do the Mother-Daughter exhibition, originally I was like, no, that's not, I keep everything separate, and I wouldn't do so many family pictures necessarily, although I have a lot of them that I've taken. I would think those aren't to show to the public, but now I kind of see it much more intertwined within my career and my personal life, that it sort of can be part of my work. Yeah, so I've grown in sort of, my opinion has changed on that, and now I kind of, as long as it's a photograph that was taken because it sort of should be exhibited and it has my approach in it, then anything I take is open for.
You like to make books of your, more than exhibitions, or you do some exhibitions, but you like to put together books.
Yeah, but my first I really didn't start publishing books until probably, quite halfway through my career. In a way, I was sort of doing maybe editorial, like magazine portraits, and some commercial and my personal stuff, but actually sitting down and making them into books came a bit later. And then when I did monochrome and colour that book, from then I've kind of done a book a year. I love it. I love the collection of the books. My heart is in exhibiting, really. I love to exhibit most, because a big part of the process for me is to be in a space and to observe the viewer and how they're reacting to my work, that kind of completes the circle for me.
You did something on ballet, for instance, right? You were very interested in that.
Yeah, I'm really interested.
How come?
I think, and again, it probably is now that I look back on it, now that I put together, my family upbringing, but I'm very interested in what goes on behind the scenes or with somebody's life to get to a certain production. Like the Royal Ballet is the top of its game. To become a Royal Ballet dancer, you have to go through so much and give up quite a lot or leave home to go to the White Lodge. And it's quite a big process. It's a devotion.
And you like to follow that.
And then I find it interesting, probably because of seeing my parents on stage. Often the audience just go and you see a performance and you just go, that's amazing. You don't think how much had to go into that. If it's done beautifully, it looks effortless, but it's perfection. But my mind goes to how much work had to go in. Who are the people behind it? How did they get there? My mind's always racing on that. So I approached the Royal Ballet and said, could I photograph the dancers off the stage, out of the rehearsal rooms, show the grit and the devotion that goes into that and the relationships between them. And the director of the Opera House said, if you pinpoint a couple of the dancers, take them out, talk to them about the project, if they agree with the project, they want you to photograph them, they will allow that access. Because I was like asking to be in their bedrooms and their bathrooms. I take pictures of them in the bath. Even so, then because the dancers wanted me to agreed, I got a pass that was an access all areas at any time, so I could just wander in and out of the Opera House.
And this became a book, right?
It's never been a book because the project was.
So what happened?
It was exhibited at the Floral Hall for like one night, 2 months after I finished the project, and then it wasn't long enough time to publish a book. And then I'm always on to the next thing.
What is the next thing?
The next thing, maybe, again, since then, I haven't sort of approached dance so much. I've done more like Mark Rylance, his process while getting ready in the theatre, or, Paris Nude, as I showed you, the following someone in their own personal space.
What you like is to follow people. Right?
I like to be invited into people's personal space.
Intimacy.
I love intimacy. I love trust.
So you sort of write a biography of people, or their work, their métier.
Yeah, and the thing is, with that intimacy and that privacy comes a lot of trust. So for someone, rather than me, if I was with you, I want to follow you in this place intrigues me. It's got so many sort of personal trinkets and stories within the room we're sitting in together now. I just think sort of how you would potter around your apartment, or what your process is, what your habits are, where you write at the desk, or I could just watch you for a day here and sort of blend into the background. But for you to just do exactly what you would do without performing for me or doing something different for the camera is when it really clicks.
Did you, for instance, your younger sister Stella became a fashion designer. Are you working with her sometimes, or you work on fashion? Or?
Yeah, I'm not a fashion photographer. I've sort of more people portraits, studies, wandering around life. I dip into fashion, and I love doing fashion when I do, because that way you get to tell a story and a narrative, and I love working with the team, like with the hair, makeup, stylists, assistants. That can be a really great process. And yes, I've done a few campaigns with Stella, for Stella, for
you work well together?
Yeah, we work really well together. We're very close. We grew up, we're 2 years apart in age, and we were each other's sort of entertainment. And, as I say, because we would travel a lot as kids, and we were and when we were in Scotland, we would sort of go out for the day and be each other's company. So we're close, and we challenge each other in a good way. And there's sort of an honesty between us. So usually helps the project. We sort of challenge each other to do better. So it ups my game a bit, which I enjoy. But,
you also did a documentary, right? What is this documentary Wing that you did?
It's a documentary I did with my ex-husband. Before my mum passed away, my mum and dad asked us to do a documentary on wings and that part of their lives. So I worked on that with him and interviewed Dad. But unfortunately, Mum passed away before we kind of really got started on it. So she wasn't part of that process. So
that was a big drama in your life.
it was a big drama, yeah, because it was a big drama for all of us because she was sort of at the heart of the family.
How old was she?
58.
So rather young.
Yeah. And the process, you know, her illness sort of lasted over a couple of years, we knew of it, so I did get to spend a lot of time with her over that time.
Because you were the eldest child, right?
Well, we all were... no, I have an older sister as well.
Who was your mother's daughter,
Yeah,
right?
my sister
So she
Heather.
had a previous marriage.
Yeah, my sister Heather and then me and...
And what is your relationship with America, which should be your second country, right?
I've always thought of myself as half English, half American. I spend we'd always spend a lot of time travelling to New York to see my grandfather while he was still alive. And in the summers we go to Long Island to see cousins, and that's where and uncles and aunts, that's where we would all come together. And lots of cousins and family. I like those kind of group gatherings. There'd be like 20 of us, 25 of us when we get together.
Did you have some attachment to your Jewish background, or?
I think sort of my mum wasn't religious, so I didn't grow up at all knowing, and I don't know very much at all about the Jewish faith, but I like the values of it. I'm drawn to it, but we were not brought up really religious at all, although there is believing in spirituality.
And all this vegetarian philosophy that you pursued since a long time, you even wrote, that I know, 2 books. One is called Vegetarian Home Cooking, right?
Food.
And then you have another one, At My Table. How come? I mean, why you're vegetarian and why did you write books? Because this is another field.
Well, it's always
and
been...
also you have a third field, which is charity, right? You since your mother died,
yeah,
you were a very close friend of Cherry Blair and Tony Blair, and you did a lot of charity work.
I wasn't close with them, but I knew them. I knew Fiona Miller, who was Cherie Blair's personal assistant and boy. So she was the one that invited me in to take the photographs of Leo Blair. I was invited into Downing Street secretly to take the first pictures when he was born, which again was a really interesting, very personal, like a family in Downing Street, the first family to have a child. And I was sort of taken in through the back entrance to take the pictures to release to the public because they didn't want like paparazzi following them and being hounded, so they released the pictures. And all of the proceeds of that did go to charity. And then I work on Meat Free Monday because we've grown up as a vegetarian family, to answer your previous question. And all of us are vegetarian. Our kids are vegetarian. My sister is, her kids, my brother, my dad. And I think we believe in it.
To be a vegetarian means that you don't eat
meat or fish.
Neither meat, no fish, no cheese.
I mean, I do eat cheese and eggs, but I'm much more plant-based now, which means not cheese and eggs, but I do, when I know where, I'm quite privileged in that I'll sort of source eggs that are free range or local eggs or things like that. I don't eat eggs.
But you never ate meat or fish?
I've tried it, but never sort of a lot. We grew up, when I was a child, my mum and dad sat us down, they were like, we're going to be vegetarian at home, because they connected, like they were eating lamb in Scotland, and they looked out the window and there were lambs jumping around, and then they were like, how cute is that lamb? And then they looked at the plate and they were like, oh, we're eating one of them. So that put them off eating it. So I connect it when I do it. So, and I love cooking vegetarian food, and I like to show people easy, non-fussy ways of doing it. So my latest creative project, sort of merging my art world and my food world, is called Feeding Creativity. And it's a project where I cook a meal or afternoon tea, and I'll take it to an artist's studio and we'll eat together, and I'll photograph them with the food and write down the recipe. And
Which artists in the...
So far, and then I'm hoping to make that into, or I plan
This
to make
will be
that
a
into
book
a
and-
book and an exhibition. Maybe 2021, that'll be finished. So far I've done Ed Ruscha, Cindy Sherman, George Condo, Sir Peter Blake, David Hockney, and Rose Wiley.
So what do you do? You go to their place?
I ask them, do you mind if I bring you, would you like me to bring you something to eat?
Well, what do you bring?
I bring some different things, so it'll become a cookbook. So for George Condo,
George Condo?
and for instance, that was in Long Island, and I had not met him before. Often the situations I get myself into photographically, I don't know the people very well, and I think that's part of the process. Is I'll go in with someone I don't know very well and try to get to know them and gain their confidence quite quickly. Often it's not somebody I know very well. I don't know why I do that, but that seems to be a situation I get myself into. Then I get a bit nervous and shy, but I have to push myself.
But you
past
arrive
that.
with your little picnic.
So George Condo, I had a call and we were leaving to come home the next day to London, so I didn't have much in my cupboard, the kitchen. My dad said, oh, George Condo's happy for you to come in a couple of hours to sort of have tea with him. So I was like, what am I going to cook him? So I went and I had pretzels, chocolate, peanut butter. So I was like, I'm going to make pretzel, chocolate, peanut butter cookies. I came up with this recipe, put them in the oven. I was like, I've never met him in my life. I was like, it just feels like American, and we're in America, and his studio.
And he liked it?
And I got there a bit nervous. The cookies were still warm because it was such a quick process. And I was like, I brought these cookies thinking, what if he hates this? I don't know what he likes. And he was like, oh my God, I love pretzels. And he showed me on his phone a picture of a giant pretzel that he had just actually texted to a friend of his. So that was a good icebreaker. And then I went into his painting studio and he sort of painted while he ate the cookies, and we chatted and I took pictures. And
which camera you use to take pictures?
For that I was using a digital Leica. Often I use a film camera, so Paris Nude. And also the David Hockney pictures I think I took on a film Leica, not digital.
What did you bring to David Hockney?
I brought him a...
You did it in California?
In California. I brought him a... I actually had a hangover, so I really wasn't in the mood to cook that day, but I was like... I thought I wanted to make him something for lunch, something a bit more satisfying.
But you can drink.
Yeah, I'm allowed to. Yeah, drink is vegetarian. I love to eat. I just don't like to eat meat. So I made a short crust pastry, and I caramelized red onions and wilted spinach in lovely extra virgin olive oil, and I sort of put that across the sort of pastry and melted some Gruyere cheese, smoked Gruyere cheese on, and took that to him.
And he liked it?
It was yummy. Yeah, it was good. And then I took it to him and he ate it and we chatted and he showed me what he was doing, and he told me, we talked a lot about his mother who was vegetarian growing up in the Second World War. She would get vegetarian ration cards, which I hadn't thought of.
Yeah.
And then, so she'd get a couple of sort of normal ones and vegetarian, so then you'd get more eggs and cheese. So then at home, I thought it was quite clever.
Mm.
So I like talking
and what
about food.
Ed Ruscha?
Ed Ruscha.
He was in LA too. You did it in the same time.
I'd never met him before. No, I did it separate times.
Now, how do you decide to do it? You like the artist?
Yeah.
You like their work?
I like the artist. I'll have some kind of connection, to be able to contact them.
And what did you give to Ed Ruscha?
Ed Ruscha, I actually had come from Arizona, so I didn't cook for him yet. So for that, it'll be like a citrus lemon orange polenta cake. But I haven't made it yet because I came from Arizona straight to him at his studio, and I took a bag of fresh lemons that I picked from the lemon tree before I left, and I took them to him. And it turned out in his studio in the back. Have you ever been there?
No, I interviewed him at Claridge's.
Yeah.
He's a wonderful man.
Warm.
Yeah.
A very sort of, friendly, super friendly.
Yeah.
And, but again, I'd never met him, so.
I think he had waffles for breakfast, or get something like that.
Nice, sweet. So good. So I have in mind I'm going to make him something sweet. He at the back of his studio, I didn't realise there's a citrus grove. So he has like grapefruit trees, clementine trees.
So you always find the right thing, right?
So
and who
I
are
took
the new
pictures of him picking the oranges. And
who are the new artists you have in mind to interview?
I want to do sort of some more British based as well now. So I would love to do. I think I'll do the Chapman Brothers. I'd love to do Cornelia Parker. I did Rose Wiley here.
Are you going to do Gilbert and George?
Gilbert and George, I would love to do.
We did it.
I've collaborated with Tracy Emin a few times because I had this idea a long time ago. I hadn't met her. Again, I hadn't met. We became friends after this, but I hadn't met her. But I had this idea of her art connected to then Frida Kahlo, because I was like the connection between Bed and the strong characters and how their work is very personal to their own lives. It's sort of like very autobiographical. And I had an image of me taking a picture of her in bed as her, and then doing another picture of her dressed as Frida Kahlo. So I got hold of her email address and I emailed her and with the idea and thinking she's either going to love it or hate it. And she replied back really positively and really, agreeing to do it. So I went to her. She was living in her studio then. It was before she moved. Now she's in the home and separate studio space. But so it was perfect. Her bed was in the studio, and then we went to a nearby daylight studio, and I got this costume for her and dressed her up as Frida. I'll show you the picture. From there, we've collaborated often. Like she did a project. We did a fashion story for Harper's Bazaar in Australia where she wanted to be she had a pregnant tummy on and dressed in denim.
She was pregnant?
She put like a strap on like a pregnant tummy. So we did it as she was pregnant. She sort of, like you would do if you're in a movie. She put one of those on and we went around her studio. So we've worked on various projects together since then. But I'll show you the picture. And she's used this picture. She really liked it. And I love it. But the expression on her face, she sort of went very...
That's very good.
Yeah. So I kind of got the bed and sort of referenced the pictures. Right. But the thing is, she went into the expression on her face. We were sort of chatting, and then when she started posing as Frida, she went very kind of serious and went really into sort of...
Perfect.
Yeah.
So that's a great idea. So what are you planning now? This double book, cooking and artists?
Feeding creativity. Mm-hmm. Cooking for Artists is feeding creativity.
And are you planning a new exhibition or something like that?
I think that will become an exhibition. I'm also wanting to... I've guest edited the UK version of National Geographic last October 2018. Was it that long ago? And for that I went to the wild remote areas of Snowdonia in Wales to photograph horses in the wild ponies, because I have a connection from my youth with horses and learning to ride. It was very wild, like going out on a pony, being kicked off and then having to walk home. So that's how I'd learn to stay on and ride. It was sort of very...
There's not much in
I will do more between the relationship between humans and horses and the physicality of that.
There's not much about music. You didn't take too many pictures of...
I have photographed musicians.
You did?
I have been invited into those situations, but maybe not my own sort of projects. I call them my personal projects, but which become books or exhibitions. But yes, I have. Like I was asked to photograph. Joni Mitchell was in London recording, and I was invited in to sort of observe her for a couple of days in the studio.
Because you are also part of the world of music.
Yeah. And I do, I'll go and photograph my dad in the studio.
He introduced you in the world of music.
Mm-hmm. And I'm comfortable within it. I do have photographs from that world, but often the projects I do kind of happen in a sense unplanned, like the Off-Point Royal Ballet project happened because I was invited to exhibit at the Royal Opera House. So then from there I was like, oh, the Royal Ballet. Oh, and then an idea came into my mind, then I approached them.
But as a child, when you were a child, the Beatles were still together?
They were just breaking up. I was born in 1969, so it was all through that turmoil.
Do you have a memory of John Lennon or?
I do, but not through the Beatles time. More sort of in New York, going to visit them.
And you never took pictures, or?
No, I was really.
You were too young
for that. Yeah. So it's just more memories. But I think photography for me is memories and catching memories.
Is it memory?
Yeah. It's memories, it's
and you
catching memories.
You take photographs of your children?
Yeah. I take photographs of everything that sort of catches my eye.
You're the type of person who carries a camera with you all the time?
Yeah. I'll have either, obviously, my iPhone. I usually have a little sort of Ricoh or Leica small compact camera that I can fit into my handbag, and then like 35mm. But I've also, like the Stella campaign I did on 10x8 Polaroid of Kate Moss, that was on my mum's 10x8 camera. That was really a great process. But then... Is
Kate Moss a very good subject to photograph?
She is, because she's got so many sides to her character. And she knows how to be in front of the camera. She's very collaborative and beautiful, obviously. And then on my phone, I'll do this project on Instagram called #someone, which is when I leave here, if I'm walking to the tube, I might see somebody really interesting and I'll take a picture of them on my phone and that will go onto my Instagram. So that's a collection that I can use sort of to keep me more interested in Instagram.
And who are the photographers that you, besides your mother, who have somehow influenced you, or that you particularly like? Or
I love Diane Arbus, in that I like that sense of wandering, finding characters and being invited into their world and showing the real side of them. That's something that I like to do within my work too. And the characters she had, and the sort of how much I love the photographs as images, but how real they are as well. They're not sort of veneered and highly produced. I love Gary Winogrand as well, the book Women Are Beautiful. I love that book. I love there's a book called Raise a Laugh, which is a colour book by Richard Billingham, which again is him in his home photographing his parents. It's all very dysfunctional and crazy and amazing and loving and wild. So I suppose narrative in photography, like for me to catch an image that you would hang on your wall or see in an exhibition that would arrest you, stop you, make you look, spark your imagination, bring a memory from your past into your mind, intrigue you. That's what I'm interested in.
I think nowadays you can like it or not like it. It can be this way, not anymore big news, the Instagram, right? Mm-hmm. But this kind of world has changed so much, the whole thing, that one picture becomes a symbol, right? And this is what I always was interested. I mean, there are in a lifetime some images that you have in mind that are symbols. Mm-hmm. And also, for instance, when I think iconic. Of the War of Spain, right?
Yeah.
There's this famous picture, which is a fake picture, made by Capin, this legionnaire with his gun. It's highly symbolic, right? Or the other images that remain
Are you talking
iconic.
About the new world of photography, like new technology in that? Because when you talk about that, it brings to mind something I found very surprising. Just after Lady Diana died, I remember watching a programme and seeing on the news about her relationship with Dodie, and it was a photograph of them both on a boat. Did you remember that? They were on a boat, and it showed the picture, and it really surprised me that it was legal or allowed, but on the programme, and this is going to technology, they showed the picture actually had them sitting near each other, but she was looking out of the boat to the sea. But the press, and I think it was shown in The Guardian, which surprised me because usually they don't usually sort of do that type of tabloid press. They'd sort of gone around her image, photoshopped it and flipped her. So she was looking in at him, and it made it a much more romantic picture, and it sparked a lot of media attention. And obviously they were hounded a lot in their relationship. I found that very surprising and misguiding, and also that side of it, I was like, I actually found that disturbing. It made me feel, how is that allowed? How can that happen? That kind of thing. So I suppose it goes back to my thing. I like very real, gritty, truthful things. I found that I didn't like that. I didn't like the fact that the tone of the picture, literally, but I also found it really intriguing seeing it on the screen, that from going like that, you, as we are almost together, you looking at me, but she was like that, and then flipping it, changed the whole idea of the photograph.
This is a mischief, right?
And it changed the whole tone of it. So
it's like you can make montage, no? You take you and him,
crazy.
And then they say they are together, and
how that can be put into a newspaper and be allowed is sort
right.
Yeah, I think and also, you know, as a mother with the newer generation, all of us, it can be very easy to get very upset by social media.
What do you think sociologically, you know, of this world that takes photographs all the time of everything, you know? Once upon a time, there was one photography of the family for Christmas.
Yeah.
There was one. Now, mothers and fathers, and they take millions of pictures of their kids, and then they take pictures in the museums. They kill the postcards.
And on Snapchat, like my son will take a picture just like that, just to write a message on it, and then it goes.
Yeah, but what do we do with these pictures?
What we do. What do you mean? Just
I keep my father and mother and children photographs everywhere, but they are very private, right? Suddenly people love to take everything all the time.
But then I feel like
and then they run to post it.
I know what you're saying. I think that's
bad?
I personally think that's fine, whatever personally you want to do. So in a way, it doesn't really affect us. If someone wants to do that, that's up to them. When it does, it isn't fine, is when their pictures are being used to manipulate somebody else, or somebody's taking pictures, and potentially a lot more blackmail on social, you know, in this situation, or accessing people's cameras, getting things. I think when it becomes sinister, then it's bad, when it's affecting people's mental health and making them feel bad about themselves. Also, this idea of things being retouched. I do retouch some of my images if they're going into a magazine, but I'll always be very open about it, and I won't cut one head off to swap it for another head or remold the picture. I might take a spot of your face.
Are your children taking pictures?
Yes, they are. I mean, I think my whole family have a creative eye, but none of them as a sort of career yet. But they're artistic.
And you're happy with your...
It's true, I have to be very careful with them about social media, because I don't like people or kids. I don't think any kids should Instagram where they are, the location they're in, pictures of their school uniform. I think I've just been brought up a bit. I feel like there should be a privacy to...
Yeah, but now more and more people love to communicate.
So things like that, I'm like...
hearts and love and all the time.
And also certain things are very contrived. You know that certain people aren't necessarily having as great a time as they're making out. So it's a very interesting area.
So you don't like when it's fake, if I understand.
I'm really not interested in it when it's fake.
And if I understand well, you like to follow one of the characters you choose, you know, famous or non-famous.
Yeah.
And to go into the life, to go into this intimacy, which is ballet or friend or famous artist, whatever it is.
Anybody is open game.
Are you a good cook?
Lens. Yeah, I love cooking. Yeah, I'm a good cook in that I've
Never thought about a restaurant?
No, I work on my mum's food brand. There's a Linda McCartney food brand, so I'm a consultant on that. I worked with her on that. I think to manage a restaurant, I've always thought about it, but the reality is,
and you are happy to be in Brexit England?
I'm not particularly, but I think that's what we voted for, so...
That's the way it is.
It's like, what are we going to do? I think it's crazy we were allowed to vote in the first place. I think
are you still going to America?
Mm-hmm. I go. One of my sons is at college there.
And how do you find it? Equally?
I do. I find ours a bit more concerning, Brexit a bit more concerning because it's more far-reaching. But yeah, I mean, the world of politics at the moment, I have to look at it with my eyes a little sort of from a distance, squinting my eyes a bit.
You don't like to photograph politicians?
I have photographed. Yeah, I do. I like, what part of what happens is tomorrow I could get a phone call or an email saying, would you come and do photographs of anything? And I'll just review it and think if it's something I can do in my way. And so it's a real adventure, my career. I met you and now I'm here with you. That wasn't really planned, but it's a nice adventure. It got me all the way across town.
Don't you think this is everybody's life?
No.
That things happen by chance.
Oh.
And then...
If you let it, sometimes I think the world can be very regimented now, and I think as I kind of mature or think about things more, I think allowing the space to allow these things happen makes them happen more. If you get too sort of tunnel vision, you don't necessarily allow these more sort of unknown adventures to come into your world.
Now we're going to do horses. You like bodies?
Yeah.
I can see from your last picture in Paris.
Paris.
You are attracted by nude bodies.
Yeah. Well, that as well, again, wasn't like I'm going to do a nude project, but it's been a very interesting project because doing it, I followed this woman, Phyllis, who's actually a stand-up comedian. I know her husband, she's quite shy. I was quite shy. I sent her a text asking her to model for something else because she has this great sort of 1920s bob and nice sort of silhouette, athletic silhouette of a shape of body. And I said, I have an idea for a photography study, which was nothing to do with the nude. Love, Mary, kiss, kiss, kiss. She thought because I did 3 kisses, 3 X's, I wanted to do a triple X rated nude story. So from there, and I think she thought because she had a lot of stuff in her own mind she wanted to sort of think about and set to rest of her upbringing, Chinese American. And so through the process, I went to her apartment in Paris and me and her, my camera, a bag of some film, just wandering around. She played Nina Simone on the vinyl record. I literally followed her, stayed the night, slept on her sofa, got up, carried on taking pictures.
So you
then took the Eurostar home. I liked it because it meant I stayed with her rather than leaving and buzzing on the door the next morning and coming in. Like with the dancers, I did that. So when I photographed her in bed, I love bedrooms. I love unmade beds.
Alain Elkann interviews.